Hey everybody, it's Doc here, making another video in full kit because I'm weird. So today we're going to cover blowback, and I'm going to be using this M240 Bravo as an example of gas operated or a gas blowback system. Alright, so in front of us we have the beloved M240. I have well acquainted myself with this weapon. Characteristics of it: it's belt fed. It uses 7.62 commonly disintegrating linked cartridges. You'll see when we fire, the links the round gets stripped off the link and the link goes flying to the right, and then it operates that way. So it fires from the open bolt, which is very common when it comes to machine guns because it allows that temporary ability of cooling, and it also allows a faster action to cooperate with itself. So that way you have increased cooling with a weapon that's firing immaculate firing rates. If you look at through history, most successful machine guns tended to want to be open bolt, so you're going to come across most of those. Except for certain specific action or certain specific guns, more earlier World War I ideas, or very common for U.S. designs during World War I and leading into World War II. You're going to mostly see those closed bolt actions for those machine guns. Every country and every designer had a different purpose of why they wanted it to be closed bolt, but we're not talking about closed bolt guns today. We're going to talk about the open bolt design of the M240. All right. So I have this on slow. I'm going to put this on 2, and then I'm going to fire a nice little burst. All right, so what you see here, a lot of moving parts, right? So I'm going to move out of this cutaway, and then we're going to go into X-ray so we can examine these parts a little better. All right, so that ability of that weapon firing from the open bolt instead of the closed bolt, for most weapons like the AR platform or an AK or Glocks or Berettas, most common firearms you're going to encounter, like all of the bolt action weapons designs that we covered in the previous video, were closed bolt, to where that round is already seated in the chamber before it fires. All right. So what you're going to see is on the trigger assembly here, the trigger is going to lead up to the sear. All right, so what the sear is doing is it's catching itself on a, let me get the camera at a right angle for y'all. So if you look at the bottom of the bolt carrier group, you're going to see that there is a small notch. That sear sits there, and what that does is it just holds that main recoil spring rod and that recoil spring back and constantly at the force of, or having the force to propel the bolt forward. So when you actuate that trigger, that frees up the room for that sear, that thus allows that spring to forcefully push that push the bolt assembly forward. All right, so when that pushes forward, that's going to grab that round of 7.62 that is aligned with the chamber, strip it off of the link, push it forward into the breech, and then when it is chambered, it's going to fire. And then obviously when it comes to that, it's going to be rather similar to an AR, where it takes all of those expanding gases from that round flying down the barrel, and it hits a gas port. All right, and that's where you have your gas key and gas plug and all that. But those gases come down, leak into here, and when that bolt moves forward, it's going to be ceased forward because it's being forced forward by that spring, and there's nothing giving it that opposite bit of energy enough to push it back. So that portion of expanding gases is going to push back on this gas piston, thus forcing the entire bolt carrier assembly rearwards. And while that happens, it messes with the clockwork and the feed lever and everything in the top cover to help actuate to move the next round over, getting rid of that non-used link that's right there, Not the one that doesn't have the round, but the one that the round above the chamber has. All right. It's going to force and repeat the entire cycle of operations again, and also involve the ejection of that spent round downwards at the bottom of the weapon. All right. Now, let's put this bad boy in extreme slow motion, and then I'll break it down a little bit more focused on that gas blowback activity, okay? It's going. I should probably hold this down. It's a machine gun. Boom. Rips that, grabs that next round. Gas traveling forward. You can see right here when we fire the next one. Travels back, pushes that spring rod forward, keeps going, completes its burst. This entire time, the gunner is still having the trigger down, all right? And then when he releases that trigger, lifts up that sear, catches that bolt, stops it there, holds it, all right? It's that stop sign. All right, so we covered how the gas-operated blowback capabilities of the M240 operate. All right, I hope you guys have a nice day. To the next gun. All right, we're back, everybody. So what we have in front of us is the Hipoint C9. Hipoint just released a hysterically named version of this weapon called the Yeet Cannon. They don't have it in my program, but feel free to look it up. It's pretty funny. So the Hipoint blowback operated 9mm design is very similar, like almost comically similar to some of the weapons we've seen designed for the Volkssturm or the People's Army towards the end of World War II, when the Allies were knocking on the doors of Germany and Germany was trying to make arms for every man, woman, and child. So obviously these designs are going to be copied, moved around, and implemented in future weapons designs, which we see today with the Hipoint. All right, so we're gonna fire a couple of rounds just so you guys can generally see how the weapon would operate at normal time and normal speeds. All right, we're gonna reload here real quick, and we're going to drop that slide. All right, so we're gonna go into X-ray. You guys are gonna see that this weapon is extremely simple. Like, I commonly don't use the cutaway, but I could explain it all from the cutaway. All right, so for what we see, it's striker fired. All right, not very uncommon. What we see is that recoil spring will become compressed from the movement of the slide, because obviously that's going to go all the way to here, and then that entire slide is going to move back, and then it's going to get caught right here. Here, let me show you guys what I'm talking about. It's going to get caught behind that sear, and then obviously we have the sear cam being actuated by the trigger bar. The simple pistol construction, right? It's a very simple gun, very cheap, very affordable, and very common, but it is also a sturdy and well-trusted weapon. Now, let's see if I put this bad boy in slow motion, and then we can see how the striker assembly moves. All right, we're gonna stop that right there, and we're going to back it up. All right, so we've seen from the pulling of the trigger, actuated the trigger bar, which moved the sear cam, which just simply lowered the sear out of the way of the firing pin. That little circular notch that's on the neck of the firing pin is made to connect to the sear. All right, that moves out the way, allows that spring to spring forward. All right, and then from there, doesn't surpass that level of movement. All right, we don't have over penetration of the firing pin, springs at full extension. All right, so now every action has an equal and opposite action, right? So we have that primer being ignited, igniting the powder in the cartridge. That's building up energy and gas pressure, which is going to propel that 9x19 projectile down the barrel. Well, guess what? Something's going this way. There's going to be a force of energy going to our left. All right, so if we go forward a little more, we see how that buildup of energy is just sending all of that straight back to the rear. All right, and we're going to watch how that entire slide moves rearward, compressing the recoil spring. All right, and that recoil spring rod is aiding so the spring doesn't get caught up or move around. That's going to keep going back. All right, while that goes back, that pushes that I'm sorry everybody, got tongue tied for a moment. So that rearward motion of it allowed that sear to catch its portion to where it grabs that firing pin. So that just recocked and prepped the weapon, right? Now we have one spring under tension and it's being held by the sear, and then we have one spring that's under compression. One moment, I had an eyelash in my mouth. And then that recoil spring is under pressure and it wants to expand. All right, so from that spring is going to begin to travel forward. Now I would like to emphasize the fact that we did not see any locking lugs or anything like that in the area where a bolt would commonly be placed, right? Now, this weapon is locked almost entirely by that recoil spring rod and that recoil spring. All right, so we have that direct blowback. All right, there's no weird locking lugs to hold gas. There's no gas ports. This weapon is rechambering and reloading itself from that recoil spring. All right, I had a buddy of mine that had one. It literally was 3 generations old, and he was like, yo, my weapon's not chambering it well. It was a worn recoil spring. All right, so when we push forward with that, we see that that spring is beginning to expand, and then, sorry, that piece of brass is in the way, and then we see the bottom lip of the bolt, or the slide in this case, because I really wouldn't say that there's a bolt there, but that ledge on the slide catches that next round, strips it from the magazine, and begins chambering it. All right, now we're going to move forward a little more. Boom, it finds home, it guides its way in. That spring rod is fully extended. All right, so that's going to allow that weapon to not want to jiggle around when someone's walking with it. All right, it's a stout spring. That firing pin is being retained by that sear and that sear cam and that trigger bar. All right, so we're going to complete the animation, which is literally just the brass flying away from us. Goodbye, brass. And we're going to fire it again at 10 speed to give you guys a little bit more of a grasp on what's going on here. We're just going to complete the magazine, shall we? All right. Well, I hope you guys learned something. The separation between gas-operated blowback methods, which are commonly found in most machine guns that are medium to in place set light machine guns and some heavy machine guns, and then the normal direct blowback, which is very common for many handguns. They were used for service design. They're also used for CCW today. And hope you guys are having fun with my lovely video methods of doing this. Hope you guys have a nice day. Please like, favorite, and subscribe. Welcome to Dan Doc's channel.